Educators and students from the world are curious about the future of colleges and universities. Will they ever open? If yes, in what format? Online or blended or hybrid method? Remote learning requires a higher level of independent learning, intrinsic motivation, and support system for learning process. These days, we are hearing about for higher education, students are concerned about their tuition. Will they pay the same when they take face-to-face classes versus taking online? They are voicing their concern about their mental health and talk about their data security, their privacy. And there are recommendations coming from many about the micro-credential, some promoting micro-learning, and ultimately blended learning become a very visible solution. In 1994, 95, I was thinking, how can I create a meaningful e-learning? Is it possible? And if it is possible, then how we do it? So at the University of Texas, I said, okay, I will send one of my students to Amazon Forest. And I want to create an e-learning or online or web-based course for the student. What would I do? So many of the issues that we talk about, and they fall under things that I was thinking. Those days I was thinking, okay, if a student in Amazon Forest is not close to any civilization, but he has his laptop and maybe have internet connection or something like that. But then he will be asking question about, what about the library? How about do I see my professor? How about the design of the course? So many of the issues that I see that they're asking globally. And I've been talking, even I had an opportunity to go to different places, different parts of the world. And finally, I was able to go to Harvard University where I met Dr. Dede, and I spoke at Tsinghua University in China, Columbia Teachers Course, all the places, and Boğaziçi University in Turkey, many other. And always I'm hearing about this thing, how about the assessment? How are you going to do all this? How do you know who is taking the course? What is the quality? So having said that, so I created a framework for e-learning. Students would like to know whatever they're getting from online method, they will always compare how they used to get it on their face-to-face classroom method. So it is important, this framework, the framework is something would help you, will guide you. Stop and put the learner at the center and start asking questions about that. Have you done pedagogically? Have you pay attention to the issues that comes from pedagogy, technology, interface design, evaluation, management, resource support, ethical consideration, and institutional issues. So if you do this, stop and think this way, you cannot do anything wrong.
Welcome to e-learning and the future of higher education webinar. My guest today is Dede. He is an educational researcher and a Timothy E. Worth Professor in Learning Technologies at the Harvard University. His expertise includes emerging technologies, policy, and leadership in education. We follow each other's work. He is very familiar with my e-learning framework, which we will discuss today in this webinar. I'm happy to discuss with him about his viewpoints, emerging technologies, and lifelong learning.
Keynote speaker, Professor Dr. Dede. He is from Harvard University, Boston. Very, very distinguished individual, has done so much work.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me to share ideas. My first experiences with helping people do distance education were in 1978. So for more than 4 decades, I've seen many different technologies, many different models of distance education. And of all those years, this year is the most exciting. This year has the most opportunities connected with it. So I want to share my enthusiasm about that. So I'm going to show a brief PowerPoint and talk you through it. This is based on a book that I recently co-edited that's about lifelong learning in the global digital economy. And I want to highlight just a few ideas from that book that deal with both the outcomes of higher education and the process of higher education. So one thing we know that's happening sooner rather than later is that artificial intelligence is changing the division of labor between people and machines. And there's been a lot of talk about which jobs are going to go away completely and be done by AI. But that's really a very small fraction of work. Much more significant is all the jobs that are going to be done now by a partnership between a human being and an artificially intelligent system. And so the question is, when that partnership happens, have human beings been well prepared to turn over to AI what AI does well, but to also enhance the role based on what human beings do well that AI cannot do? So to be specific, I'm a university professor, and I work with Ashok Goel, who is an AI expert at Georgia Tech University in the United States, and he is developing AI-based assistants for university professors. So just as people have human teaching fellows, now they can have AI teaching fellows that are experts in content and can tutor students, can answer a lot of the questions that teaching fellows might typically be asked, can help to run the laboratory, can help students with the library, can help to do assessment on how the course is going and how it can be improved. And so if I find myself in the middle of all of these AI-based systems, there's one of two things that can happen. My job can be de-skilled because I turn over all those tasks to the assistants, and then I do what's left for me. Maybe I even end up sort of working for those assistants. That's not a very attractive future. Or the job can be upskilled. And because the assistants are doing simple things, which is what AI can do, that are important in teaching, but they're not really intellectually demanding or emotionally rich, I can focus more on what humans can do, the intellectual, the social, the ethical. And so my role is upskilled. And we call in the book, we talk about this as an intelligence augmentation, not AI, artificial intelligence, but IA, intelligence augmentation. Now, if you think beyond the university professor to all sorts of jobs that we prepare students for, there was recently a survey in the US of what employers look for when they hire somebody for their first job. And of course, that has shifted over time. But I found the results of the survey very interesting because communication is a uniquely human skill. Teamwork is a uniquely human skill. Customer service is something that people do much better than machines because they can much more deeply understand customers. The fact that employers are now looking for leadership, even from initial employees, reflects the fact that we're living in the time of the pandemic when you have to assume that people are going to have to improvise in their jobs. And so they have to have authority and responsibility to decide how to do their jobs. And then problem solving and complex thinking. So even for basic skills now, we're looking at human beings being upskilled to do things that human beings do well because they can turn over some of the more basic things to the machines. So what does this mean for the outcomes of higher education? Universities in the US like Stanford or Georgia Tech have published images of the future, where they might want to go. One of them would be that students don't declare a role. I want to be an accountant, I want to be an engineer, but they declare a purpose. I want to help people do well with how they invest their money. I want to help save the oceans because that's essential in coping with climate change. And that's a very different thing, because now you're not saying, well, I'm an engineer, so I have to be in the engineering department and I have to take just courses in engineering. You're saying, no, I've got a broad purpose. I'm going to need courses across the university in order to accomplish that purpose. And yes, a lot of them will be in a discipline, but I'm not just preparing myself for a role. Badrul referenced changes in assessment. And one of the things we can do now is, as students are in higher education, instead of it being all or nothing, either they get a degree at the end or they don't, they can document through performances what they're learning as they're learning it, and they can accumulate different kinds of certificates and credentials that show what their competencies are while they're learning, so that at the end of your freshman year, you have some things that tell employers what you can do at that point, and so on. We also have to think about the fact that students are going to have multiple careers, that they're not going to have the same job for all of their life. We're entering a very turbulent time in society. And so we need to prepare them for careers that they and we may not know what those careers are going to be. And that's not just skills, that's dispositions. When people confront a turbulent, uncertain environment like the pandemic, the people who are flexible, who have high resilience, who are confident in their abilities, who are happy to take the initiative, are going to do much better than people who lack those dispositions, even if those two people have the same skills exactly. Dispositions are very important in how you use your skills. So really what we're talking about is a different kind of identity, an identity that's based on a purpose rather than a role, an identity that's based on accumulating skills as you go along rather than just getting one big degree at the end, an identity that draws on many fields rather than narrowly focusing in just one field, because you're going to have more than one career. This is a little chart that one of my former doctoral students did. He was at Harvard from roughly 2000 to 2007 doing his doctoral degree. Before that, he was a high school teacher. After he graduated from Harvard, he was a researcher, and then he became a funder, and then he became a director in an analytics firm, and now he's an executive director in an assessment firm. So he's exemplifying these multiple careers. And what he's charting is how each career prepared him for the next one. Each career added skills that he needed for the next one. So I just want to close by referencing the book that says, we're entering a turbulent period in time. We're going to have to reconceptualize lifelong learning to something that we do all the time, something that includes dispositions as well as skills, something that includes a focus on transferable parts of our identity rather than just a narrow role that we're going to have for the rest of our life. And I want to talk about what business we are in. So I live about 90 miles north of a town in the United States that has wonderful mansions in it that were built a century ago by very rich people who got their fortunes from the railroads, creating the railroads in the United States. And within 20 years of when those mansions were built, they were deserted and those railroad fortunes were gone, because The people thought they were in the railroad business, but they weren't. They were in the transportation business. And so when the airplane and the automobile came along, those people got hammered. We in the university and in higher education are not in the course business. We're not in the degree business. We're not in the campus business. We're in the lifelong learning business. And like the railroads, we're going to get hammered if we don't figure that out. And the part of the university that's closest to being able to figure it out, that the other panelists will be sharing ideas about, is the part that deals with online learning and with students who are not only oriented towards getting their first degree. So again, thank you for the opportunity to share ideas, and I look forward to our discussion.
Wonderful presentation by Professor Chris Dede of Harvard University, Boston, United States. And from his keynote, I'm sure many of you understand his, years of work and his passion and his research, how to improve education. And obviously, he talks about artificial intelligence, lifelong learning. And I also, follow his work, and he's familiar with my framework. I remember that searching and found one of his students named Gilbert, I believe, at Harvard, used the framework because it encompasses all the areas that he's talking about. So thank you. We'll have Dr. Chris Dede later on with a specific question from me. Chris, do you have anything to add about the online assessment for online education?
Well, I work with a number of groups that develop infrastructures for online learning. And one of the things that those can do is to provide much more detailed information to not only to the teacher, but to students about their own performance. Often we're not very good at estimating how much time we put into things, what strategies we use to learn, and having the system reflect back to you over the past week. This is when you learned, this is how you learned, this is the strategies that you use. And by the way, there are some better strategies that you might try that would be more efficient for your learning. That's something that we need online to do because of the data that's collected. So I think that this is not only a benefit to faculty, it's a benefit to students if we're collecting that data and reflecting it back to them in ways that suggest better learning strategies.
Thank you, Chris. Well, I know there are so many questions are coming. This is one of the difficult challenging for me because I'm not a great moderator and it's very hard to read all the panels. You've been seeing these questions. Within the scope of today's time, it's very difficult to read through it, but I know we have covered so many and you still have questions. Will continue the discussions. However, I must say that all the questions you say, always I say this, stop, think this way. Put the learner at the center of this octagon. See whether you pedagogically did the right thing for them. Same question will be asked by not only students, also by other stakeholder groups, technical support, professor, and then you have university. University return of investment, they want to see low dropouts. Professor wants to see that students take the class and they finish the course with good learning. Students they want highly accessible, interactive, meaningful course so that they can go with a portfolio to the world, say that they have taken online courses.
McWeadon, enabling learning without boundaries. Busy working adults expect high-quality, flexible learning environments with good support services. We at McWeadon are dedicated to bringing high-quality, flexible courses designed to fit the time demands of busy adult professionals. We use a blend of learning approaches in our strategies to get the right content into the right format, to the right people, and at the right time. McWeadon.com. McWeadon, a professional development service provider.